Oh, I can never, ever remember the order in which we have to connect the terminal points when replacing this energy sink.
Yeah, it's like, if your ship ain't a moving, check the drive crystals crewman. When the smoot hits the yellow and the groot goes all mellow, then dab the curling and splice all wires green. What?
It's definitely red.
It's definitely green. I mean, what are you talking about?
Look at the green. There's a smoot and there's a groot. It would blow the whole relay, man.
But that's the whole point of the song. Green rhymes with Caroline. Just try it. Come on, try it.
You're on the line for this, man.
Do it.
Life is loud. From its earliest days on Earth, creatures have tittered, chirped, stuttered, and groaned over the landscape. Some sounds are instinctive, guttural reactions whose motivations are obvious. But then there are other sounds, the sweet chorus of birds, the plaintive tune of the blue whale, the unfamiliar calling of bats, that encroach on far more stunning territory, that of song.
Consider how some sounds that we life forms make are more pleasant than others. These intentionally created collections of mellifluous tones and rhythms are what humans classify as music. Many animals make a sort of music, like the male mice that sing to their mates, or the gorillas that hum while they eat. But there are only a few animals on Earth that combine melody with meaning to produce the subject of today's investigation: songs.
Passage from sound to music and finally into song is a mysterious event, one so buried in the past that most scholars have offered little more than a shrug at its origins. Every culture has language, every culture has song. It's such an ancient and fundamental practice that it can seem impossible to study.
That is, without a comparative look between humans and animals. By studying a variety of creatures and understanding how their songs work, the hope is it'll be possible to shed light on the human tendency to produce poetic songs, a unique behavior in the animal kingdom.
To be clear, there are plenty of creatures that produce songs. According to Kirsten Bohm, a behavioral ecologist at Johns Hopkins, song is broadly defined as calls composed of multiple syllables combined in a specific way and which have repeatable patterns and rhythm. This behavior is found ubiquitously through the animal kingdom. Birds, whales, even bugs all utilize sonorous vocalizations to communicate information. But humans bring a special ingredient into the mix, which is called recursive verse.
See, while most animals seem to be expressing a limited collection of ideas in their songs, human song is recursive, meaning it contains language that expresses a boundless set of concepts. It's impossible to know what came first, speech or song, but it's clear that the marriage of language and music created a medium that's able to directly encode intergenerational information in the form of memorable stories. The presence of sonorous rhythm, rhyme, and melody creates an emotional experience that helps propagate general knowledge bases, folklore, admonitions, courting norms, and other critical cultural memes at the group level without resorting to the traditional genetic mechanics.
While a fledgling sparrow will hear the songs of its parents and then spend its life perfecting what it has learned, a human child will learn to innovate. A poem or a song learned in childhood serves as the foundation for a dizzying array of ideas, many of which will be completely new thoughts, never directly heard from someone else's mouth. But why take these ideas and put them into song? Is there an adaptive benefit? Is human song really unique among the animals? To answer these questions, we have to dig down into the roots of music and animals to see what all the hoot and holler is about.
Then we'll look at all the ways in which humans have been fascinated and affected by animal song in their own development, before focusing on the matter of memory, which seems to be the favorite theory for the adaptive role of song in human development. Finally, we'll unapologetically speculate on the future of human song on Earth, and imagine what creativity looks like in a world where animals fall silent.
Chapter 1, The Roots of That Ringtone. Humans have long been obsessed with the animal world, evidence that begins with the cave paintings of 40,000 years ago and runs through to modern artists and composers that have centered the sounds of animals in their works.
In Jean-Philippe Rameau's The Hen, an orchestral arrangement illustrates the soundscape of a chicken as it clucks around the garden. Then there's Camille Saint-Saëns' Carnival of the Animals from 1886, a suite of 14 songs that spans, quote, the royal march of the lion, to, quote, characters with long ears.
A half-century later, Olivier Messiaen made another move into the world of biomusic and released the Catalogue of the Birds, a set of 13 piano pieces, each a complete sonic portrait of a specific bird species and its environment, painstakingly written out in detailed musical notation.
Shortly after Messiaen's era, technology grew sufficiently advanced that artists could use animal song as a direct ingredient in their own compositions, rather than having to illustrate them with musical instruments. Pauline Oliviero's El Relicario de los Animales was one of the first pieces to use a cacophony of animal sounds mixed with samples of human voices to create an immersive, chaotic universe that reflected and refracted the experience of being human in an animal world.
Her experimental compositions were being broadcast to the world right around the same time that the field of ecomusicology, also known as biomusicology or zoomusicology, was being born. For the very first time, humans were starting to rigorously ask the question, why do animals sing, and what is their relationship to music?
Before going much further, we have to admit that there's many answers to this question, and none of them can be claimed for certain. Vocalizations in animals are a nearly universal characteristic, and that's caused some biologists to suggest it's completely pointless to even attempt a scientific explanation. But lucky for us, our science isn't about certainty, it's about possibility, which gives us permission to speculate on questions that have been long relegated to the dustbin of history.
To clarify matters, we can bin creatures into two different groups. Those that use sound to communicate a limited collection of messages, and those who produce complex, variable, and nuanced sounds that appear to go beyond a superficial signaling purpose.
Superficial signaling is the domain of insects and reptiles, where vocalizations consist of straightforward, hyper-repetitive syntax. At least some of this simplicity can be attributed to the physical mechanism of sound production. Many of the animals, like crickets, rattlesnakes, spiders, and cockroaches, produce their sounds through stridulation, the repetitive rubbing of two hard body parts against one another.
Before we move on, can you clarify the two hard body parts?
I think it's their legs, maybe their carapaces.
I like that. Two hard carapaces.
Songs produced by stridulating creatures are simple and tend to play a clear adaptive role that zoologists have generalized to include mating, group cohesion, and territorial signaling.
The simple songs of insects and reptiles don't vary drastically from one adaptive role to the next. You need to pick up a mate, sing the song. You need to show you're a badass, sing the song but do it louder and better than the guy next to you. And of course, singing the song properly lets everyone around you know that you belong.
Songs of birds, whales, and bats present a much greater challenge to the scientist. Sure, the foundational evolutionary purpose of singing is conserved, but there's a layer of syntactic complexity that hints at an inner emotional landscape, a sort of conscious and vocal experience, perhaps, something more human than reptilian.
Birdsong is the classical example of animal communication that contains significant syntactic variation. Different song structures can play different functions. Alarm calls in the presence of a predator are distinctly different from the sounds made when singing out in a group. Crows are notoriously verbose, and groups are known to develop separate dialects that reflect local subcultures.
Whale song also seems to reflect a nuanced internal experience. Songs vary from season to season and appear to be culturally transmitted. When a pod encounters a different group, they're capable of adding a new tune to their repertoires. Performances of these songs can last for hours, with several different movements summing to a rapturous climax.
Bats, too, are capable of creating a wide variety of calls. They pass through a maturation period during which young bats burble their way through the baby talk version of the songs they'll sing as adults. They're capable of learning a huge number of different songs, which appear to have a rudimentary grammar, where certain sounds only appear in very specific contexts.
Birds, whales, and bats are capable of producing intricate songs and learning new songs, and they do it all the time. This suggests one possible role for song in nature is just showing off. Performing a song well is difficult. Though all creatures can sing, it's obvious that not all of them sing with equal aplomb. So in animals that are capable of learning new songs, it's possible that singing serves as a kind of qualifying exam for whether an individual is a good fit for the pod, mate, or leadership role.
Ultimately, these animal songs encode something that humans haven't been able to decipher yet. But it's unlikely that they contain true epic poetry. Signal analysis on whale songs shows that, despite the layered nature of their performances, the syllables within them are limited and thought to host minimal information. Simplicity of the messages suggests whales aren't reciting the baleen version of the Bhagavad Gita, at least not yet.
Well, the same thing could probably have been said about humans millions of years ago, so it's not quite a done deal. Modern human communication definitely contains the echoes of the adaptive role of song found elsewhere throughout nature. Human love songs fall squarely in the mating display bin. Music genre signals territoriality among modern human adolescents, and the cultural peculiarities of musical traditions signal belonging to a tribe or lineage.
These are all very animalistic traits and evidence for a shared role of music across the entire animal kingdom. But then humans take the game a step farther. They bring fable, fantasy, and future crafting to song through the implantation of memorable rhythmic melodic speech. In other words, they introduce recursive verse.
Chapter 2, The Music Machine in Your Head. At some point on Earth, animal song was the only show in town. But then humans did what humans do and molded the noises of the earth into something totally nuts.
Consider the Greek story of the god Pan, a goat-like humanoid that sings the music of nature. In the 19th Homeric hymn, he's described as follows. Quote, "Only at evening, as he returns from the chase, he sounds his note, playing sweet and low on his pipes of reed. Not even she could excel him in melody. That bird who in flower-laden spring, pouring forth her lament, utters honey-voiced song amid the leaves."
Pan plays his tune on a flute, an instrument that occupies the mouth and prohibits speech and verse, reinforcing the division between animal and human song. But when he challenges Apollo, the illuminated Catharist who symbolizes the enlightened ideals of humanity, to a musical duel, Pan loses. His beautiful song is no match for a stringed instrument that allows for the addition of sung poetic verse.
Sure, it's just a story, but it contains within it a grain of truth. The finding that all those attempting to explain human music are forced to reckon with. The sounds that humans make aren't like anything else in the animal kingdom. They can express an unending litany of increasingly complex ideas.
This recursion is nearly absent from the animal world, and it's considered to be the unique human characteristic. See, you creatures are capable of learning a set of foundational principles, and rather than just repeating them for the rest of your life like most animals do, you can create a new kind of symbol for anything you can imagine that hadn't existed just moments before.
Song, then, with its ability to get down into the crevices and cracks of the mind, can easily be modeled as a mnemonic device. A memory trick that's intended to help keep track of all these new ideas from generation to generation. But before we explore this further, it's worth mentioning at this point that not all scientists even agree that song plays an adaptive role in human history, though they are in the minority.
Steven Pinker, for instance, has argued the auditory cheesecake hypothesis, which suggests that the phenomenon of song is nothing but a fun side effect of having fused the ability to speak with pleasant notes. Another non-adaptive approach to the origins of song is the assertion that it's merely, quote, accidentally transformative technology. That, like fire, there was no incrementally adaptive precursor, but once song was discovered, there was no way back.
One thing is certain, that music is universal. All cultures have music just as they all have language. This implies a degree of convergence, since many of these musical traditions develop similarly despite their geographic isolation. If music was just a happy accident, it seems to have been an extremely common happy accident.
Like accidentally doubling the quantity of space worms called for in the space pizza recipe?
Something like that, but more common and more adaptive. More like if everyone on every spaceship in the sector all stumbled on the space pizza recipe to rival yours at exactly the same time.
Well, that's harder to imagine.
Considering the fact that nearly all animals that humans have studied present with some sort of song, it seems quite likely that singing confers at least some adaptive role to all those singers. Even bacteria call with chemicals. Perhaps the beauty of those chemical pulses simply has yet to be decoded.
So far, we've considered that animals across the board sing to signal in mating, territory claims, and group identification. And we've conceded that some scientists think that song just came out of nowhere. But what are the other possible adaptive benefits unique to your species alone on Earth?
One idea is that song in humans has roots in nurturing child development. The theory goes that early human mothers created calming sounds to quiet frightened, crying infants, which might have otherwise compromised the tribe when faced with predation. Others have gone so far as to suggest that this behavior gave rise to language itself, that speech is actually a special kind of song between mother and child.
Similarly, song may serve to knit whole communities of humans together, even across lifetimes. After all, the human song, with its frequent fantasy elements and social messaging, focuses a group upon their culture's particular ordered representation of an otherwise chaotic universe. Song may essentially serve to calm and connect all you big babies in the face of an increasingly mad world you might find yourselves in.
When human groups gather together in praise of their gods and nature, music almost always makes an appearance. This may be in some part an attempt to copy nature and thereby assert dominion over an otherwise terrifying natural world. By transforming loud sounds traditionally associated with danger into controlled rhythms, the subversion of nature itself is showcased and the human spirit elevated in proportion. As a bonus, the production elicits a powerful hypnotic state in participants, a state that makes individuals particularly susceptible to lasting impressions.
And what better way to forge a memory than with the fully harnessed power of nature itself? With the thunder of drums and lightning melodies to raise the envy of birds, music married to language makes a perfect mnemonic device for transmission of intergenerational cultural knowledge. Ancestral mothers knew it, ancient priests knew it, and every rock or rap star on the planet today operates under the very same principle. Memorable ideas make the most impact in the long run.
Chapter 3. Music as Time Machine. Music and memory seem inextricably bound. Alzheimer's patients are known for their ability to recall songs long after other memories have faded. Song can even temporarily breathe new states of wakefulness into these patients, as illustrated in the documentary Alive Inside, which shows the powerful, uplifting effect of music on patients that have lost their memory.
Recent studies in the US and Japan have found that song doesn't just soothe the memory impaired, it also helps healthy people form and retrieve new memories. Harvard researchers have found that lyrical singing can rescue damage to the left hemispheric speech centers of the brain by allowing the patient to express and recall thoughts via singing centers on the right side. Former U.S. Representative Giffords used this method to testify before a committee just 2 years after losing her speech centers, physically, to a devastating attempt on her life.
This unique human ability to optimize memory through word music seems to be present right from the beginning of human recorded history. Many early written epics, including the Vedic texts and the Hebrew Bible, appear to have been originally propagated as oral traditions, most likely in the form of song. Philologist Michael Weitzel writes,
"The Vedic texts were orally composed and transmitted, without the use of script, in an unbroken line from teacher to student. It is, in fact, something like a tape recording, not just the actual words, but even the long-lost musical accent has been preserved up to the present."
Speech evolved before written language, and so there's no way that early human tradition could escape the challenge of memory. However, you'll notice something like the Iliad or the Vedic verses is quite long. So how does a bard remember the whole thing?
With memory tricks based on rhythm and meter, the foundations of musicality. Researchers Albert Lord and Milman Perry argue that they found this oral fingerprint in a variety of ancient poems, from Beowulf to Serbian oral poetry. Instead of memorizing the whole piece word for word, bards would memorize specific phrases in the correct meter, like rosy-fingered Dawn, swift-footed Achilles, glancing helmed Hector, which would then allow the poet to improvise the subsequent details.
Similar formulaic phraseology makes additional appearances in Islam, Catholicism, Asian folklore, and Australian Aboriginal culture. It's an illustration of the innovative nature of human cultural inheritance. Each version of the story is slightly different, held in place by a collection of common phrases. The mnemonic power of musically spoken motifs may be the reason that some of these texts have survived to the present day and still serve as the living foundations of countless cultures.
In general, sung traditions allow the audience, and often the performer, to step outside of themselves, to examine the world through another's eyes. Aristotle identified 3 types of sung tradition: songs about experience, which he calls lyrical, songs about relationships, which he calls drama, and the stories that transcend prosaic life altogether, which he calls epics. In other words, humans adopted songs to display and discuss their internal feelings, their interactions with others' desires, and how to comprehend their shared natural predicaments: birth, death, and the cosmic eternity. Together, these aspects catalog and codify a people's culture.
And there seems to be an additional payout of singing over written codices, in that they allow for the regular conceptual proofreading and examination of foundational laws and mores across generations. As a story is sung and resung, mutations are introduced which can lead to new ideas. The ideas that persist throughout time, however, aren't necessarily these new ones. They're the ones that are the most universally applicable in the lives of the most people across the ages.
So far, the songs served you well, humans. But one question remains. Will you keep singing even when your entire civilization's knowledge base is conveniently available with the click of a mouse? Chapter 4: Roommates in the Tower of Song.
A new age is dawning, my humans. New songs with new sounds appear daily and displace the old verse stream by stream. Timbres shift towards the mechanized as more and more people are living their whole lives away from the familiar musical influences of nature. But perhaps it's not just humans who will be affected by this shift. Nature seems to be answering your call.
And as we've seen, humans might have begun singing, at least in some part, to mimic nature's magnificent and powerful voice. But there's mounting evidence that Pan's tune is changing, that there's a recursive interaction between humans and all other earthly singers. We call this the biogeosonar cycle.
For instance, it might be no surprise that 10 minutes of birdsong improves well-being in polled hikers under controlled conditions. But animals are affected by human songs in return. Cows produce a little more milk when listening to slow songs versus fast songs. Dogs in kennels appear more relaxed when subjected to soft rock versus hard rock. There seems to be a mutual exchange of emotional content that transcends the species boundary.
But the biogeosonar cycle is under assault. Ecomusicologists have found that environments have a distinct aural signature where creatures are able to peacefully coexist because they're able to be heard.
But humans are loud on all frequencies, in all times and in all places. Increases in marine traffic leads to changes in whale songs. Sonar equipment interferes with pilot whale vocalizations. Birds, fish, mammals, reptiles, and arthropods, most of the classes and phyla on Earth, have been shown to at least some degree suffer reproductive sensitivity in response to anthropogenic noise. Even humans are victims of their own ability. They suffer from noise-induced stress and heart disease.
The peripheral effects of the human cacophony reinforce your distance from the natural, non-human world of song. Who will sing to you in your cities in the absence of the other animals? The US, for example, has suffered the loss of more than 1 in 4 birds since the 1970s alone, and 200 species of frogs also disappeared in that time.
If the trend persists, and the sonic landscape becomes dominated by the interface between humans and the machines you build, will you simply just mimic yourselves in future songs? The experiments with AI-generated music might preview the potential horrors of such an outcome better than anything else. Do you remember what GPT-3 synthesized after digesting human music and human music alone?
Pull that up.
Terrifying.
That's rough. But humans aren't in an echo chamber just yet. There's some hope for a more animal and human-friendly sonosphere going forward. Whisper quiet technologies are beginning to materialize on the market that cater to quieter performance. Everything from water systems to air compressors are employing new techniques aimed at keeping extraneous decibelage to a minimum. Maybe in the future, your planet will see the emergence of noise-canceling devices on the scales of ships, clubs, and planes that do the most damage. Maybe you'll bring back nature's choir through conservation efforts or protective legislation. Awareness is the first step.
Now it's in your hands, humans. Will the progressive loss of your musical peers in the natural world cost you your song altogether? Or will your Apollo come to find room for Pan in the court after all? It's worth remembering that harmony is a key feature of musical composition. All the best choirs demand it. And harmony is all about the balance between different voices, even when it's different species. But good luck, humans. You got this.
We decided to start investigating human artists this week by taking a look at the production of recorded music on Earth right now. So what follows is a conversation with Larry Crane, the editor of Tape Op magazine, a publication dedicated to behind-the-scenes stories of musical mixing and recording. He's worked as a recording engineer and mixer with some luminaries like Jenny Lewis, Death Cab for Cutie, and Elliott Smith at his Jackpot recording studios, and we were glad to get his perspective on the entrancing nature of recorded music.
That is coming right up. If you like what we do and you've got the means, consider powering us up on Patreon. For just $5 a month, Earth dollars, not Alva Floss dollars, you get behind-the-scenes looks at how we make these episodes, get your names in the credits, and get looped in on the brainstorming sessions. Thank you to our first 3 patrons, Alexi, Pam, and Charles. Are you going to join the ranks?
Get some.
Do it.
In addition to our old discussion place on Zuckerbook, we've got a brand new shiny Discord server linked in the description where you can come hang out and talk all things human. A huge thanks to all those hanging out already and demystifying, like Liberty, Gus, Dave, Heretic, and Not Late for Dinner.
Definitely not late for dinner. So settle into this conversation about music as a cosmic portal with Larry Crane, and we'll see you next week, my humans.
Enjoy the jams.
Bye.
If you look at the history of language, lyric and song form do precede the written word, because if you put something into rhyme, then your brain will be able to remember more. Probably the original songs were like, don't go down past the big rock, there's an evil wolf on the other side. You know, there's some kind of meter and some kind of story that you need to know so that you don't lose your children. You know, and they turn into things like the Odyssey or Beowulf. Bible, you know, big works of fiction, basically. The thing that's good about poetry and lyrics is like the imagination, that we can create possibilities that are worth exploring. Instead of closing the mind down and making you think that the world is only what you see and perceive, that maybe it's something that opens up the mind to looking a little further.